Hey guys, it's Faye from SolarFlow and I am back with an all new video. Today's topic is a deep dive behind the veil energy read on three very notable former US presidents. So we are going to be looking into the energy of George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Thomas Jefferson. So if that sounds good to you, please stick around, and if not, I will catch you at another video. Now, I know you may be thinking this is quite a departure from the usual content that we share here, which might be anything from true crime to celebrity culture to celebrities to spiritual or metaphysical topics. So you might be wondering, why former American presidents? This is because my mom, hi mom, has been asking me to do reads on historical figures for quite some time, and I could not imagine a better place to start than very notable former US presidents. So first and foremost, if you are enjoying this at any point, I invite you to smash the like button down below. And if you would like to see more content like this, please comment down below and let me know you're enjoying this. And also, if you are enjoying it, please make sure to give a shout out to my mom and let her know that this was a goodie. And with that in mind, let's dive in. Now, I'm going to share with you that I did not channel them in chronological order, i.e. as in their what number US president they were. I'm going to share it in the way that I actually channeled them, but once the information came in, I really wanted to actually conclude the reading with Thomas Jefferson as well. And I think if you watch the video all the way through, you will come to understand why I chose this order. But we are going to start with George Washington, and this is what I got from the first paragraph in his Wikipedia page. George Washington was an American military officer, statesman, and founding father who served as the first US president from 1789 until 1797. George Washington also led the Patriot forces to victory in the American Revolutionary War. That is all the 3D information that I'm going to share with you guys, because just like I accessed it on Wikipedia, you guys definitely can too. And I'm just going to remind you that what we do here is we're actually peeling back the 3D veil and exploring what are the soul, spiritual, energetic, or vibrational components behind the veil. So we're not going to be talking about like what was notable about his presidency or what was his major achievements or what scandals was he embroiled in, or no, because there's Wikipedia and there's Google for that. But if we want to learn the energy, what was going on with the person, that's what we have SolarFlow for. So we're going to be looking at his energy specifically. And as you know, if you are not new here, as you know, and if you're new here, you're about to find out, energy reading is not a precise science. It's not like preparing a recipe to make something to eat. It's not like coloring by numbers. So when doing an energy read on somebody, any number of things can come in, but it's always going to be what they specifically want to share with me. Because prior to doing an energy read on any person, whether it's a client of mine or a historical figure, I have to ask their consent. Is it okay for me to connect to and to read your energy? And then once they grant me their consent that it's okay, sometimes I may ask them questions, but sometimes they might just want to bring things in that they're kind of in the mood of sharing. And free will always reigns supreme, whether we're alive or whether we are on the other side. So I know like my mom had been asking me questions about Abraham Lincoln, and I was like, you're just gonna have to watch the video, I'm not gonna share. She was asking me very pointed questions of what, if she was an energy, she might wanted to have asked him. I didn't ask questions. I was like, hey, yo, what's up? Do you want to talk to me? If so, I'm the hand that holds the pen. Whatever you want to share, I will write down. All right, now with that in mind, we're really going to dive in. Now, George Washington, his energy came in as being incredibly grounded and incredibly balanced. So for anybody, because I know I have a lot of viewers that also enjoy, or they might be astrologers, or they might enjoy like watching astrological reads on people. The way George Washington's energy came in would be akin to somebody whose chart was perfectly balanced, having the perfect equal amounts of air, water, fire, and earth elements. Very balanced. A tinge more on the grounded side though. Now he also came in as being incredibly logical, thoughtful, fair, and open-minded. However, once he settled on an opinion, it was hard to change him of it. What was also shown to me is that he was incredibly gifted, and he had clairvoyance, which is the gift of, one could say, clear seeing. Now, the way clairvoyance can manifest in people is differently. So for some people, it can manifest where they can get insight into a potential future timeline. The way clairvoyance can also manifest is where people can see various things on a behind the veil level. So someone can be technologically clairvoyant, where they can look at something and they can, with their mind's eye, look at it and understand how it's working, like how are the joints and the rivets and the spivots and the turners and the twisters. I don't know anything technological, but they can look at it and they can immediately unpack it through their gift of clairvoyance in understanding, just by looking at the way something is manifesting, what's actually going on behind the scenes technologically that is comprising the way something would work. So for example, somebody might be technologically clairvoyant. They might look at a car and they might understand immediately, like, what makes this car different than a different kind of a car. That would be a similar kind of an example. George Washington, however, he was clairvoyant, but not of a technological nature. It more manifested as seeing the future, but more as the ability to see how things would pan out and how they would potentially play out. Because here's the thing with the future. There is no absolute. Because when we're taking into account the free will of every single person on the planet, on a global scale, that can really shift timelines. But even if there's a particular thing that he was working on, and it would only, let's say, pertain to a smaller subset of the population, there's still free will of all the people that are going to be impacted by it and all of the people that would have to be brought aboard onto it prior to something going through or prior to anything being done. So he couldn't necessarily see the absolute future or the absolute, the way, like option A, option B, which option is going to actually come to pass. No, it more manifested him as having the ability to see the potential way in which something would pan out and which it would play out. Now, from his perspective, though, this was not seen as a gift, but rather this was seen as a product of his logical and balanced mind and being able to see both sides of any situation and coming to the best conclusion. But it was a gift. So even if you yourself are somebody that has a very, very logical mind, and you might, for example, also think that you can come to the most logical conclusion of something based on both sets of facts, understand that not everybody can do that. And it has nothing to do with the fact that somebody has a logical mind and another person may not. It actually has to do with the fact that that is a gift. Being able to see a potential timeline and how things are going to play out, or being able to see which option or which variation is going to be the most favorable, it's actually a clairvoyant gift. We can call it whatever we want to. We can call it a product of our logical mind. It's actually a gift. Because yes, sometimes our gifts do not manifest in a woo-woo, over-the-top, spiritual kind of a way. Because all of our gifts pass through the lens of the person it is coming from and it is coming through. And because he himself was balanced, that is the way it came through for him. Now, what was also shown to me about George Washington is that his heart chakra, we'll talk about that in a moment, but his heart chakra was blown wide open, and he had an amazing capacity to truly put himself in another person's shoes. Now, in case you're unfamiliar with this topic or this idea of what a chakra is, look at a person's chakra as a meridian point in their body. And we all have various chakras that run from the base of our spine all the way up to the crown of our head. And they stop at various places. So there's the one at the base of the spine, there's in the stomach or the solar plexus, then there's one by the heart, the throat, the third eye, and finally the crown chakra. And look at it this way. Imagine you are on a very, very busy but very, very straight road. And you might then, for example, because it's so completely straight and there's not a lot of curves in the road, you can be at one particular red light, but you could see, let's say the next 5 or 10 red lights, and you can see like what's green and what's red, and you will kind of like be able to gauge the flow of traffic because you can see at all of those lights in determining, well, I'm at a red light now. When this one turns green, is the next one going to be green still, or is it going to be red? So look at the meridian points on their body as kind of operating the way traffic lights on a very, very straight street will run. But instead of it directing the flow of traffic, i.e. cars, it is directing the flow of energy. And if we have a particular blockage in our body, for example, look at it like showing up as a red light, where it's going to slow down the flow of traffic, but again, in this case, it's the flow of energy. Now, it's not to say then, for example, that if you have a blocked chakra in your stomach, you won't be able to access all of the other chakras. No, because again, you're at one light and you're able to see 7 lights ahead of you. So you will be able to determine how fast or how slow you're going to go. But it's not like if you're at a red light here, you're going to be at a red light stuck there for the rest of your life and you just won't be able to go. It's just a way of more saying that it might slow down the flow of traffic, i.e. energy, but it's not to say that it's stuck there forever. And this is to say that his heart chakra, for example, was shown to me as being particularly, like imagine if you will, it was the green light that was always green light. It doesn't matter like what time of the day you were driving there, day, night, Monday, Thursday, every time you would get to that light, it was a green light. That was George Washington's heart chakra. It was blown wide open. So there was never going to be any slower flow of traffic around it or slower flow of energy around it because it was always blown wide open. And therefore, how did it manifest? As having an amazing capacity to truly put himself in another person's shoes. Another way of saying this is he was highly empathic. And even though he was a war general, what was shown to me is he did not like war and felt, unfortunately, that it was a necessary evil to bring balance into a deeply unbalanced world. Because again, he was truly balanced and therefore was always trying to seek balance. So he was able to see it as a means to an end, but not an end unto itself. Because he understood the cost of war was too great to bear. Like a country can never always be in war, but it's not only for like the financial reasons. People are going to get hurt. People are going to be, unalived. So he was looking at it from the empathic point of view, which is, this is just a means to an end. But this, in his mind, it's like there has to be a better way. But until he could establish a better way, he really looked at war as just a means to an end, but not the end upon itself. Now, what was shown to me about his presidency, because again, I just allow the person to share with me whatever wants to come in. I don't necessarily, it's not like, tell me about your role as general, tell me about your role as president. I allow them to control the flow and what they choose to share with me. So about his presidency, he scoffed at it. He first and foremost shared that the world was so different back then, and he concedes that in some ways, despite war and not having the luxuries like we have now, and everyone having to work so hard just to survive like we do now, in some ways, everyone back then was so pure and so naive. No one had the knowledge of what was going on across the world and at our fingers and instantaneously like we do now. Phones, internet, social media. We kind of almost are oversaturated with information that's, do we really need to know everything we need to know? And he also had shared with me that people could be so much more present back in his day as president because all they had and all they knew what was around them and nothing more. Now we're almost too, this is his opinion, we're almost too savvy, and in some ways it's broken us. It was easy in some regards to be president at that time because no one knew any more or any less than another person knew. And the naivete of the people in that time, they were willing to believe in their president in a way that we don't necessarily always believe in our president. Because it's like, we all have access to an overabundance of information, and with that then comes almost like a certain arrogance or a certain level in believing that our opinions are the most right and true opinions, and that if we were president, we would know exactly what to do in this particular case. But do we actually know everything? Or do we just know what's being reported to us on the world stage without necessarily having the understanding of the intelligence or what's going on behind the veil or anything else that might be happening? No. So at that time, there was a certain level of naivete in which people were really well and true willing to believe in their president. But now everyone thinks that they know and they can do better than anyone else. And there's too much arrogance in the world because of it. This is George Washington's opinion. So at the time, he didn't think it was particularly grand to be president, but also again, he saw it as a means to an end. Like, what can I do? How can I lend my knowledge and my experience and my expertise to help bring balance into the world? So he had seen it as a means to an end, but not as the end upon itself. Meaning this was not somebody that had any major aspirations or goals of like wanting to necessarily be in power. He said it's probably how our presidents today should ideally feel about it, but cannot, because they are owned and on some level deeply, what did I write here? Because they are owned and on some deeply level, it looks like I wrote brain. They are owned and on some level deeply brain? I don't know what I was trying to say there. Could it be another word? I don't know. Anyway, this is what he continued to share with me. Deeply brain. Oh! I left out a word. They, and on some level, are deeply brainwashed by growing up in the club. If you want to learn more about this, I have linked a previous Ask Me Anything in which I had done a segment on George Bush Sr. and what he had shared. So from George Washington's point of view, all of the presidents today are so deeply brainwashed because they all grow up in the club, and therefore they have a very, very limited scope and understanding of the way in which the world works for the regular everyday person. He also shared with me, it's also not to say that the club wasn't around then, or that it wasn't something he himself or other early presidents weren't part of. But again, just to state that it was a different world and a different club and very different men as well. And as parting words, he had shared with me the most notable thing one can do from his personal opinion is to speak the truth and to speak it loudly. So that is the energy read that I have for you on George Washington. Now, the next former notable US president that I had looked into was Abraham Lincoln. Now, Abraham Lincoln was an American lawyer, politician, statesman, who served as the 16th US president from 1861 until 1865, when he was, I think I could say the word, assassinated. Now, he had also led the Union through the American Civil War to defend the nation as a constitutional union and had defeated the insurgent Confederacy. He also abolished slavery. He expanded the power of the federal government, and he modernized the US economy. That was a whole lot from the first paragraph of his Wikipedia page, and I'm going to be very honest with you. I don't recall what half of this was. Yes, I know he was the president that had abolished slavery, but I don't know what it means to have I don't know specifically what he had done that expanded the power of the federal government, or what the fuck he had done, or what the fuck Wikipedia thought he had done back in the mid 1800s that modernized the US economy. But he did. And again, I invite you, if you want to learn more about that, you too can read his Wikipedia page. I just, however, do not. And I'm going to share this as I get to his page in my notebook, because why? I don't ever want to read anything that's going to influence me about the particular topic that I am looking into. Therefore, I will do the bare bones necessary and minimum amount of research, such as only reading the first paragraph on someone's Wikipedia page, so I can share with you some valuable 3D information. But outside of that, I don't want to know. My logical brain will probably try to corrupt any of the energy reading information that comes in, because it's going to be passing through a certain kind of a lens, like, well, hey, this doesn't match with that, and then why the fuck am I an energy reader if I'm so ingrained in the 3D? I'm not, so I don't. All right, Abraham Lincoln. So this is what was shown to me about Abraham Lincoln's energy. He was a real salt of the earth kind of a man. So again, for my astrology loving friends, this would be someone that had a lot of earth in his chart. Very grounded, very connected to nature, very connected to, I would actually even say that he might even have like a lot of Taurus in his chart. Not just like any particular earth, but like a lot of specific Taurus. But a lot of earth in his chart, because every time I have looked into his energy, I always see him at his log cabin surrounded by big, beautiful pine trees. And that was his happy place and where the world most made sense to him. Now, hearing that, you or one might actually think him to be a simpleton or a country bumpkin. But that could not be further from the truth. And here's why. Because he was so grounded and he had spent so much time in nature, he was naturally attuned to energy and had a so-called sixth sense when the energy was off. So whereas George Washington was somebody that had clairvoyance, the gift of clear seeing, Abraham Lincoln had the gift of clairsentience. And clairsentience is the gift of clear feeling. So it's when somebody can tap into the energy of an environment around them or the energy of the people around them, and then through that be able to tell when the energy is off. That was Abraham Lincoln. His energy was also shown to me as he was highly intuitive, and he would notice the littlest nuance in a person's body language that told him everything he needed to know, especially if it was a nuance that pertained to the person's eyes, because if the person had shifty eyes, that told him everything he needed to know about the person. Because growing up around other salt of the earth kinds of people had firm handshakes and a steady gaze. People would firmly shake your hand and they would maintain eye contact with you. So if any time someone had a weak handshake or shifty eyes, it was always a red flag to him. Now, what was also shown to me about Abraham Lincoln is he also knew about the dark side of life. So just because his happy place was near his log cabin in the woods, he very much knew about the dark side of life. Again, this is not a simpleton. And the way it had shown up for him was almost like precognition. So without even the absence of it, he would still know of its existence. What's precognition, for anyone who wants to know? It's having a sixth sense that something is going to happen before it happens. So the way in which, for example, that may show up for somebody that has precognition, so this is a big one. I actually know somebody that they have this. They can be at a wedding and they will know when they're at this couple's wedding if this couple is going to last or if they're going to get divorced, and they're even going to be able to have like a timeline of when that's approximately going to happen. That's precognition. That's a gift as well. Why am I highlighting all of these things? Because it's to show you our gifts don't just appear in woo-woo ways in which one might be, apt to discount it. You hear voices, okay, you're crazy. No, sometimes those sixth sense that we have are actually gifts and abilities, like precognition. Like being able to tell if somebody has a weak handshake and shifty eyes, that something's not on the up and up. These are all gifts. But again, remember, the way they are being shown to me is through the lens of this own person's internal energy. So they may not be recognizing it as a gift. It doesn't make it any less a gift just because of that. Now, what was also shown to me, because he was so highly intuitive and so highly gifted, he always knew he was going to cross over or be unalived, not of natural causes and at the hands of another. So, meaning he knew he wasn't going to cross over in a ripe old age of natural causes. He knew that it was going to be at the hands of another. Again, he was not a simpleton. It's like he was somehow tuned in to the ley lines of the earth and how they had impacted human nature. Now I'm going to explain what ley lines are. Think about them, if you will. Just like each person has meridian points in our own bodies, which comprise our chakras, imagine, if you will, there are ley lines in the earth as well. And just like the degree in which our chakras are open or closed, it's going to influence the degree of energy in which a person can draw from their energy, and in what capacity. Like, is their heart blown wide open, i.e. George Washington? Or is their solar plexus open, i.e. Abraham Lincoln, with the gift of clairsentience, right? Depending on what chakras we have open is going to allow us to tap into whatever gifts are held there. Ley lines in the earth operate the same way, where there's certain energies that go through the earth, and then depending on where there is a accumulation of a particularly powerful point of a ley line, there's going to be more potent energy at that location. A blocked chakra lends itself to a lower energetic export, meaning the amount of energy we can tap into and draw out of it. It's the same thing with ley lines. Ley lines can be very, very open, or they could be very, very dense, and they could be very, very closed. And then depending on the energy that is converging there will then also influence the energy of the people that live there. So if there is a low dense ley line, then the way in which the people were going to be living there would be influenced by that ley line, and they would show up having a lower, denser energetic output. If somebody lived at a point where there was a very, very high vibration ley line, they too then would also be influenced by it, and they would show up as having a higher energetic output. So Abraham Lincoln, was tuned into the ley lines of Earth and how they would impact human nature. He had a strong moral compass, and anytime he would have a hard time making a decision, he would always imagine himself being back at his log cabin in the quiet, surrounded by his beloved trees, and imagine if he was confronted with this decision, what choice would he then choose? And that would then allow him, or it would then guide him. Because in the noise of the presidency and the expectations that people had of their presidents, he could sometimes feel lost. But by taking himself out of it, at least temporarily and mentally, it always allowed him to be guided to the best possible scenario and the best possible decision. Now, Abraham Lincoln's energy had also shown me that he had a deep sense of responsibility, and for better or worse, was always duty bound to it. Now, because again, I give the person's energy free rein to speak to me or share with me anything that they choose to. And it was at this point, I think what he really wanted to drive home, that he had a sense of being duty bound. So thereafter, it was at this point that he had shared with me, he had no further desire to speak about himself. But he did offer something else up to me, which is that he had shared being on the other side and seeing all that he can see and knowing all that he can know. He would then therefore never allow his energy, his true energy, to be tapped into by an actor who played him in a recent movie about him. Now, he's referencing the actor Daniel Day-Lewis. And why did Abraham Lincoln bring this into me? Because in the energy read that I had done on Hollywood and the movie industry, I had shared that actors will sometimes allow themselves to either be taken over by entities, or they will also allow themselves to connect, or at least attempt to connect and tap into the energy of a historical figure, to then bring that person's energy forth into their own body. So that way it's almost like they're not acting like them, it's more like they are embodying them. And that is why sometimes a particular actor will not just win an Academy Award, but it's almost like everybody is gushing, and they'll even say like they have embodied the energy of this person. What's another way they put it? They get lost in the role. It's almost like you can't see where the actor ends and the person who they're playing begins, and vice versa. That would happen in a case where they have not just acted like the person, they have fully embodied them, because they have opened their physical vessel to allow the energy of that person into them. Now, what was Abraham Lincoln sharing with me? Because he's on the other side and he has a higher perspective, he would never allow his energy or his true source energy to be tapped into by an actor that had recently played him, i.e. Daniel Day-Lewis. And if you want to learn more about what I had shared on actors embodying the spirit of a person, I have linked the video that I have done on the Hollywood industry down below. So yes, what Abraham Lincoln had shared with me is he can see the person's intention when they're trying to connect with him, whether it is for the dark or for the good, and therefore he would never allow his soul's essence to come in, either to commune with someone or to allow them to siphon parts of their energetic blueprint out of them if it wasn't for the good. So yes, what I spoke of in my video on the Hollywood industry is real and true. But no, it did not happen to him. And he was not nearly as dry as he was portrayed to be by Daniel Day-Lewis. So he's confirming that these things do happen, but he would never allow his energy to be siphoned off. And thank goodness I think I had actually said in that video, I'm not saying that Daniel Day-Lewis did, I'm just using it as an example. Because I didn't get that he actually did. But it made a good example anyway, because he played a historical figure. Now, it was at this time that I had asked if he had anything else he wanted to share, and he stated that our Earth has cycles similar to seasons. And if we go back and we look through history, however, if we look at the uncorrupted history, not the history of what we've been told has actually happened, but the actual genuine and true uncorrupted history, we would be able to see that. He also had shared with me it's absolutely why it is being concealed from us and why so much of history is being now currently rewritten, where they're tearing down the statues of historical figures and they're trying to make them out to be like they weren't good people, when in fact maybe they were good people. It's being concealed from us, because if we knew that and we saw that and we understood that everything historical abides by seasons or cycles, we wouldn't feel that what is going on in the world right now is so random and so chaotic, because we would know by looking through past previous incidents in history, it's just a cycle that's playing out. But despite that, to take heart, because we are in an up cycle right now, or a so-called spring season, and a time of a renewal and a time of future promise. Because as the saying goes about the month of March, it comes in like a lion, but it goes out like a sheep. And the dying embers of old man winter is just only baring its teeth. But just as the dawn always follows the dark, so too will the baying of the sheep. Now, I don't know if this is a poem that he had been quoting, but this is literally what he had brought into me, and it kind of sounds poetic. So I don't know if he was a poetry writer, and that's why as he was energetically choosing to disconnect from me, he just brought in a bit of poetry to make it sound very beautiful and poetic. I don't know if he was a writer, because again, I don't do 3D research. I don't know if he was quoting a poem, but this actually sounded incredibly poetic, and I'm going to actually say it again. Because as the saying goes about the month of March, it comes in like a lion and out like a sheep. Because the dying embers of old man winter is baring its teeth, but just as dawn always follows the dark, so will the baying of the sheep. So that is the energy read that I have for you on Abraham Lincoln, and we are now going to conclude by looking at the energy of Thomas Jefferson. Now, Thomas Jefferson, again, we're going to start with a little bit of 3D. Sorry if I just kicked my tripod there. So Thomas Jefferson was an American statesman, a diplomat, a lawyer, architect, philosopher, and founding father who served as the third US president from 1801 until 1809. He was also among a committee of 5 men who had drafted the Declaration of Independence, though Thomas Jefferson was the primary author. Now, prior to becoming president, he was also the first United States Secretary of State under George Washington, and he had served as the vice president to John Adams. Now, let's see what Thomas Jefferson's energy wanted to share with me. So, first and foremost, his energy, again for my astrology lovers, came in as being a chart that would be heavily influenced by air. Because, wow, big thinker, big sharer of information, a lot of air energy, but not to the point where I would say it caused him to be imbalanced. So when I was doing the 3D, looking into his Wikipedia page, and I was like, philosopher, I was like, that is completely the way his energy had come into me. Very philosophical, a lot of concepts, a lot of ideas, a lot of exchange of information, a lot of air in his chart. But again, not so much that it would cause him to be out of balance, but just where he would show up energetically as being somebody that was more tapped into the air energy around them. Now, let's see what his energy had wanted to share with me. I actually really liked his energy, and that's why I'm doing him at the end. Now, Thomas Jefferson, as soon as I connected to him, admonished me to brush up on my history when I couldn't place him. But he wasn't doing this out of a sense of arrogance, or how could I not know exactly who he was, but actually more out of a sense of duty and honor to our country, and to the value he places in it and preserving our history. Now, you might be wondering, if I wasn't able to place him, why did I even do an energy read on him, right? Like, I knew he was a US president, but like, he's not quite as, sorry, Thomas. It's not like he's as known as the first president, i.e. George Washington. It's not like he's known as being one of the presidents that was assassinated, i.e. in Abraham Lincoln. So it's to say, of course I knew him, of course he was in my periphery, but I couldn't quite place and yeah, he was actually kind of right for admonishing me. The dude basically wrote the Declaration of Independence. So yeah, you could actually kind of say, shame on me for not knowing that. So he was right in admonishing me, right? But again, it wasn't out of a place of arrogance, but it was more a sense of duty and honor to our country and the value he had placed in preserving our history. Now, this already told me so much about him without even going any further, right? This is not a man that's arrogant. This is a man that is duty bound to preserving our history because he has a sense of patriotism and loyalty to it. So again, this is again without the arrogance, but to say that he is proud of what he was part of, which is the founding of America and the creation and the implementation of something new and radical. He also came in as being idealistic with a very clever and lively mind, i.e. all of the air, that he knew he could do great things with. And this is why he shared with me next that is one of the things he's sad about for us now, which is the lack of space in which people can collect our own thoughts and our own ability to create. Now, he had said this is not a physical lack of space, but it's actually with all the technology that is around us and all the noise that it creates, and thus then all the things that are competing for our attention. We got cell phones in our pockets, we got laptops, we got TVs, we got radios, we got the ability to call somebody on the other side of the world. We have WhatsApp chats, we have social media, we have YouTube. I mean, so again, it's not for a lack of physical space. It's because of the overabundance of how we can be connected. Again, because he has a lot of air in his chart, he's always thinking about the way in which information is shared. We have an overabundance of the way in which information is actually shared with us right now, that it is causing us to have a lack of mental space with everything that is then therefore competing for our attention, which is akin to literally being shouted at with information, thus hijacking our minds and short-circuiting our mental capacities and our mental capabilities. What did they say in the last few years about social media? It's causing people to have a shorter attention span. And that's why there was a rise in Reels and now in even YouTube Shorts, because we want to get as much information as we can in the shortest amount of time, right? What can we see as we're scrolling through our Instagram feed that's going to catch our attention? Because if it doesn't entice us and it doesn't catch our attention, we're just going to keep scrolling. So give us the important bits in a video that's 1 minute or less. So from his point of view, again, being somebody that values information and the sharing of it, he had said from his point of view, it's like we are literally being shouted at with information, thus hijacking our minds and short-circuiting our mental capacities and capabilities. Because back then, here's actually where he kind of like echoed what George Washington had said. Back then, the world was in some ways so much more innocent and so much more raw. And back then, there was so much space for men to be men without being told how men ought to be. Because now men are in fact being told how they ought to be. And he had shared being masculine and rugged was a virtue. And there was no higher honor a man could be called to than providing for your family and taking care of your woman. Therefore, he's horrified by the world of today and the slaves that we have all been turned into. Not just men, although he concedes men have become slaves to this idea of what a man ought to be, right? Like now masculinity is considered to be toxic. Back then he's saying to be masculine was a virtue. And now it's like you can't take care of your woman, because if you take care of your woman, it's almost like you're saying, like you're being accused of being old-fashioned, right? Like, what? Your woman can't take care of herself? So this whole idea of what it means to be a man has been hijacked, where men can't be men any longer because society is telling men what they ought to be. But it's not just men that have been turned into slaves, especially women too. Because this is Thomas Jefferson sharing it. This is all his energy. Okay? And I'm not going to confirm nor deny if I agree or I disagree with them. I am the hand that holds the pen. But if you've watched my other videos, chances are you probably kind of have an idea of where I stand. But let's go back to Thomas. He had shared how women had been turned into slaves, because this is not how society honors women, by turning them into cows and milking them till they are dry. In his day, women were soft, so they could be soft for their children. And if I think this is not, or how anybody who is watching this, because again, you probably know how I feel about this, if anyone who is watching this thinks this is not how God intended for us to live, this, by today's standards, is certainly not how God intended for women to live. it's like a compare and contrast, right? Like modern day women might almost be called to look back at the way, and we don't even have to go back hundreds of years to when Thomas Jefferson was alive. We can go back to like the 1950s, right? Where women didn't necessarily work. It was very unusual for a married woman and certainly a mother to work, right? Like the secretaries were the single woman prior to them settling down and starting a family, because once a woman got married, she was then therefore to take care of her little kids. I don't know why it looks like he keeps shaking, but she was then therefore home to be taking care of her little kids, preparing foods for her little kids and taking care of them and having, dinner ready on the table for her husband when he came home from providing for her. And the kids came home from school and they were now hungry. Where women weren't being like a thread on a sweater being pulled, where it was once it was pulled that it was going to be completely unraveled. But because we now wear, women specifically, so many different hats, we are in some ways, he's making the argument, we're being unraveled, or we've been turned into slaves because we're not soft any longer. So we're not soft for our children. And now we don't let our men take care of us, because then it's like, oh, what? I can't take care of myself? I'm a modern day woman. I can take care of myself. So we've been energetically turned into slaves by the way in which modern day life has been telling women in which we ought to live and what we ought to place our values in. So yes, Thomas Jefferson had a very lively mind, and he is also very clearly astute to the ways in which the world works and how it currently works right now. So whereas George Washington represented balance and Lincoln represented earth, Jefferson is all air, but not to the extent of being out of balance. It's just more to say that he is robust and full with ideas and the exchange of ideas and the flow of information. And thus he had shared, that's what made him suitable with his jobs. And what jumped out at me as being particularly notable is that he had said jobs, where he had namely not named his positions because he feels no attachment or arrogance to it. Again, this is not an arrogant man. It's not like, yo, lady, I wrote the motherfucking Declaration of Independence. I'm so rad. No, it's not the way his energy is. It's not fucking arrogant in the slightest. It's more like his positions and his jobs were notable because what he had used it for to the benefit of the country, not for the benefit of he himself. Now, at my mind writing this, he also had interjected, because again, this is, and I've kind of shared this in some other videos as well, that the way it works when channeling somebody's energy, it's not like having a actual verbal conversation where we don't know what's going on in their mind, and then therefore we have to wait for them to finish saying whatever it is that they want to say so that we can come to understand what it is that they're sharing. And then once they've done that, we can then formulate our ideas and then we can respond. So it's kind of like playing tennis, right? The ball volleys back and forth. It's not like that when I'm dealing with somebody's energy, because there's no veil between the way in which they're sharing information and the way in which my thoughts are actually being activated by it. So the way in which actually one would communicate when I'm reading somebody's energy is it's actually more akin to it's telepathic communication. There's no veil between my mind and their mind, or my energy or their energy, because it's all energy. There's no physical barriers. There's no physical veil. There's no three-dimensional veil that's separating my thoughts from them or their thoughts from me. It's like this open source dialogue that we're having with one another. So at the time that he had shared this with me, I had written, at my mind writing this, he interjected, because something was activated, he interjected and said, "That's the wild thing about it." At the time one does things, we don't particularly think there's anything great or noble about it. It's just what needs to be done. That's the way he looked at it. He wasn't thinking at the time that he was doing these things, wow, like I'm going to be a notable historical former United States president that's going to go down in the history books, and one day there's going to be a thing called the World Wide Web with this Wikipedia, and I'm going to have like... No, it's like with a sense of duty and honor. This is what needs to be done, so I'm doing it. And it's like that for the things that we ourselves do as well. Thinking what we may be doing at any particular time may be nothing, but not knowing how history may in fact remember us for it. And that he had also shared, we are so hard on ourselves, but we're already doing great things. This may explain why I wanted to save him for the end. I always like to end the videos on an uptick, right? I really liked his energy. Like, I really liked it a lot. He is very with it, very intelligent, very forthcoming, very clever, and a very, very lively mind. I loved spending time with his energy. And he was very forthcoming and a complete breath of fresh air on an energetic level. And therefore, because I enjoyed spending so much time in his energy, it wasn't just so much where it's like whatever he brought me, I was going to be okay with. But I felt called then to ask him if he has any plans on reincarnating anytime soon. And he said he has. He also shared with me he has had a few go-arounds since his time as Thomas Jefferson, but no one that was quite so newsworthy. And that suited him just fine. And he's curious what it might be like to live in the current modern day world as an old soul, but not necessarily enough to compel him to come back to it just yet. He also shared with me that the souls that are coming in at this time are the change makers. And they will make us all proud. And after the lives he has lived, he's happy to just hang back and let the new souls that are coming in now have their day. Now, it's also not to say that these are brand new souls, because it's not exactly kind of the way that it works. Him saying the new souls that are coming in now is more a reference to the fact that they're the people that are being born now. Not that they're like brand new, fresh off the boat souls that are just coming into their first incarnation. So that was my energy reading with Thomas Jefferson, which I very much enjoyed. This is also going to conclude the reading that I have done for you on the 3 former, previous, and notable presidents. As I always say, please take what resonates and leave the rest behind. And as always, and until next time, stay in the high vibration.